Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the fourth session in the Autumn 2022 Synopsis Digital Classics program. This session will be on contributing to ancient linguistic annotation projects of a couple of different kinds. And we're absolutely delighted to have Francesca Dell'Oro from Université de Neuchâtel and Francesco Mambrini from the Università Cattolica de Sacro, Cuore, Milan. Both of whom you'll have seen on Synopsis before, perhaps, but talking about slightly different things here. And of course, my colleague and the organizer and matrina of Synopsis, Monica Berti, is to my left on your screen, I think, that side. If you're watching this live on YouTube, please feel free to use the live chat feature, which is either to the right or below your video, to make comments, ask questions, and so forth. And we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll try to come to your questions at some point. If you're watching this later, obviously you can't ask live questions, but do feel free to get in touch with any of us if there's anything you'd like to talk further about. And most importantly, do feel free to use this video and use the materials, the readings and the links that are in the session page, which you'll find a link to below this video, in your teaching or in your learning at any point. We're very keen for this to be an open program that is used as widely as possible in teaching. We all use it in our teaching, and our students will be among those people watching this in the future, but we really want anyone else out there to use this as well. So we're now going to have about an hour of presentations and discussion, followed by then some more open discussion, which you, the audience, can join in on, as well as those of us here in the call. So without any further distraction, I think Francesco is going to kick us off with the first part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Thank you very much, Monica, for the invitation. It's always a great pleasure to be presenting here at Sunoikis. It's always, I think you're doing a fantastic job with this community, really, and you deserve all the praises. So, my first part of this session, I will introduce a little bit the concept that it's so prominent in the title of today, that is linguistic annotation. So, say a little bit about linguistic annotation. And in particular, I would like to introduce to you a project that is very popular and very important, I think, at this moment, in the current, in the last years, for linguistic annotation, not just of ancient languages, you will see, but really in general, but where ancient languages already play a very interesting part. So it's a very exciting and very interesting project. And namely, you might have seen it in the program, I'm talking about a project called Universal Dependencies, short UD. It's probably not really a project where you can immediately start contributing, but we can discuss ways in which people that may end up being enthusiastic about this whole idea and this project can play their part. And I will also give you a couple of ideas on how to make some exercises on what we say today to familiarize yourself with universal dependencies. So I will go full screen with my slides, and here we come. So universal dependencies, an overview. This will be the first part of this session. So first of all, the session is entitled "Contributing to Linguistic Annotation, Ancient Linguistic Annotation Project." But what do we mean when we say linguistic annotation? Annotation is basically, we can define it basically as just the practice of adding metadata to describe something, right? To describe some properties within a digital resource, digital obviously, because we are talking about digital resources, but not necessarily digital, or its elements, its parts. And when we talk about linguistic annotation, obviously we describe the practice of adding metadata to describe the language, some linguistic properties of the resource or of part of a resource, of components within this resource. I would like to stress the fact, so a way to adding metadata to account for linguistic phenomena within, most of the time, a corpus, so a collection of linguistic materials that it's collected and stored in digital format. And I would like to stress three components of linguistic annotation, which especially I think would be important when Francesca will introduce her project. As language is distributed in layers, from phonetics to morphology to syntax to interaction with the discourse, or the layer of pragmatic, so linguistic annotation can be layered. You can have multiple levels of annotation stacked on top of each other to describe the same linguistic resource. It's systematic. You must most of the time you really have to annotate everything or nothing at all. So every single word, every single part of this resource that can bear annotation within your schema must have some annotation. And at least potentially it's universal. What I mean by this is that once you design a schema to provide annotation for a linguistic resource, this schema can be applied, at least potentially, unless you really design it to be specifically targeted to a specific type of text or a specific language, can be applied and ported to many other languages, type of text, genres, etc., etc. So now let's come to a project that it's not just universal in potentially, but it's universal in its own name, Universal Dependencies, UD. What is UD? Well, basically it's three things at the same time, we can say. It's a framework for cross-linguistically consistent morphosyntactic annotation. I've taken these three definitions from an article that it's also listed in the suggested reader for this session. You'll find it in the GitHub page. So let's repeat. A framework. So it's a project that provides you with a workflow, guidelines, rule to perform morphosyntactic annotation on a corpus that is cross-linguistically consistent, that is portable across different languages and remain the same across different languages and different language manifestations. But it's also an open community effort. So it's a community that aims to create morphosyntactically annotated corpora for a huge variety of languages. And for the regular users, it's also a collection of such resources, of such corpora. And it's a growing collection of corpora. In this last release, it's 228 tree banks in 130 languages. So languages can have multiple corpora that document their varieties. I've used this word, tree bank. So let's give a definition. What is a tree bank? A tree bank is nothing more than an annotated corpus where texts are split into sentences. So sentences are divided, are isolated within this corpus, and each word in each sentence receives this metadata that we were talking about, this annotation on some morphosyntactic aspect, including and this is what you find, for example, in UT, but not necessarily. As I said, it's layered, so you can add multiple layers in this annotation. But in order to have a tree bank, you must have at least part of speech. So each word is defined as being a noun, a verb, or according to the categories that each schema defines. Optionally, other morphological features of the word, so features that would document an analysis of the word. So the lemma, for instance, you all know that if you take the example that it's in the picture on the right, you won't find, I don't know, sunt on a dictionary, but this is obviously an example in Latin. But you will have to know the main form of this verb that you have to look in the dictionary to have information on this word. In this case, this will be labeled under the lemma sum, right? And so on and so forth. So this is the lemma. Or other morphological features. This verb form, sunt, it's a third person singular of the present indicative, active. So this is also a morphological analysis that can be written down into. The morphological analysis can be written down on a tree bank file. But also, and probably most importantly for a tree bank, you also have a definition of the syntactic relations, a way to encode the syntactic relations between those words in a sentence. You see an example on the right of a file where this type of annotation is stored. You see that here you see a sentence where each line represents a word, informally. More formally, we speak of tokens, including punctuation, where each of them receives levels of annotation that here are represented as columns in a tab-separated file. We'll see a little more specifically what we mean. Why universal dependencies? And why do we talk about dependency tree bank? Well, I said that in tree banks you have encoding of syntactic relations. And dependency tree banks rely on a theory of family of theories of syntax known as dependency grammars, where syntactic annotation is represented, or syntactic relations are represented as direct relations between words, between a head word and a dependent word. And in other words, syntax of a sentence is not reconstructed as being made of constituents like phrases, like noun phrases or verb phrases, as in other theoretical framework, but the words are directly in relations of the one to the other. And one word is taken as the head of a sentence, and all other words are dependent on one other word, just one other word. And the result is that a sentence can be becomes a graph, and this graph is also shaped as a tree. And here is here you can see two ways of representing, visualizing these syntactic relations that are stored or encoded in a tree bank file like the one that we saw before, right? This file where this text file where a sentence is split into the different tokens, different components, and each of them receives annotation. But if you establish this type of dependency relation, you can end up with a syntactic tree like the one that you see in the left, where you have the main verb as the root of the sentence, and the other words, the other arguments, the other satellites of this verb, like the subject, the direct object, the indirect object, verbal participle in this Greek example, are represented as dependent on this main verb. But you can also visualize that with arrows going from the head to the dependent, as in the smaller window. It's completely equivalent. These are two different ways of visualizing dependency relations within a sentence. Now, universal dependencies is distributed. So if you go to as I said, universal dependencies is also a collection of tree banks. And if you download one of these tree banks, you will find a text file like this one, encoded in a text format that is known as a CONLLU format, which is, as I said, just a text file. You can open it with any text editor that you have on your computer. And if you open it, you will find that sentences are represented, separated by one blank line. Here in this slide, I just report one single sentence. And there are a few metadata on the sentence, like the ID or the running text of the sentence. And then every word has 10 different columns. You can see them all, for example, in word in word number 4. Epea. This is a sentence from Homer. This famous sentence of the winged word, and so speaking, he uttered the winged word to him. Word number 2. And in word number 4, epea, words. You can see you can see that. You have 10 different column tabs that are separated by a tab. The first one is just it's numeric ID, going from 1 to the last word of a sentence. In this case, there are 7 words in a sentence, so it goes from 1 to 7. The second column is the running text, so you can read the sentence from top to bottom. Kaimin, phonesas, epe, aptero, enta proseuda, period. And then the third column is the lemma, epos, in the case of number 4. So you will search for this word in under epos in a Greek dictionary. The fourth is a universal part of speech. So it's a part of speech that it's taken from a list of 17 universal categories that are given by the guidelines of the project. So you cannot have different part of speech for your own specific language. So if your language has traditionally a completely different part of speech, no, you cannot add it there. You must select one value from the universal list of part of speech that is given by the project. Whereas in the fifth column, you can have whatever classification of part of speech that you want. In this case, this long string is taken from the original tree bank from which this sentence was, the annotation was converted. So Perseus tree bank, the ancient Greek dependency tree bank. The sixth column, case, ac, gender, neuter, number, plur, you might already imagine, holds those morphological features that account for the rest of the morphology of this word. So it's not just a noun, but it's an accusative, neuter, plural, and this is all. For a verb, you'll have even a more complicated analysis. And then column 7 and 8 represent this syntactic dependency relation. It says that epea, the word number 4, depends on word number 6, proseuda, and this dependency relation is labeled as obj, which, if you look at in the guidelines, stands for direct object. Let's skip what column number 9 is. It's a little more complicated. In column 10, it's just other type of miscellaneous annotation. And in this case, we list the fact that this comes from Iliad 1, line 201. Now, I won't have time to discuss too much about to say too much about the rules of annotation, the principles of annotation that universal dependencies uses. Let's just mention the two most important ones. The first one, you might perhaps already guessed it, it's the primacy of content words. And it means that universal dependency established the main relationship of head dependence between the lexical words and leaves the so-called function words, like, for example, prepositions or conjunction or articles, for example, as dependent. So, for example, in case of this sentence, which means that where is Menelaus speaking again in the Iliad and says that the sword broke into my hands, the verb broke, age, is the root of the sentence, and the subject xiphos depends on the verb, and this adverbial satellite, this expression, in my hands, is annotated with ends depending on the verb and the preposition depending on the noun. Another important distinction is the one between core arguments, which basically means the typical arguments within transitive construction. So the subject, the direct object, and the indicator that you can find in your prototypical transitive constructions are distinct from the other one that are the oblique and are annotated as oblique complements. As in this case, you can see that the subject is different from the adjunct into my hand. And here you can see a tree from English that can be used to familiarize with the syntactic relation. So, for example, you see that the article, the determiner, depends on the noun. You see that the sentence is the third was being run by the head of an investment firm. You can see what I mean by primacy of content word. In the verb, complex verb form, was being run, it's the lexical part that gets prominence, run, whereas the auxiliary was and being depend on the verb, and so on. So a few words on why I think it's important to talk about universal dependencies. I won't read all the text in these slides, but let me just point out the fact that universal dependency is fantastic to do exactly what it was designed to do. So cross-linguistical and typological comparison between the languages. And it's particularly interesting if we do ancient languages, and in particular if we do ancient Indo-European languages, right, where comparison it's extremely important. But even if we don't talk about Indo-European languages and we just do typological comparison between languages, universal dependencies, which is annotated according to a common schema, is extremely important for us. And let's talk about, yes, Indo-European languages and just have an idea of why it is interesting. You see, on the right, I have an example of a sentence taken from the Sanskrit, from the Vedic tree bank of Sanskrit. There are already several tree banks in ancient Indo-European languages, including Vedic, Latin, Gothic, Old Church Slavonic, and some other are being developed, like, for example, in Hittite. Greek is a particular case in its own, because, believe it or not, ancient Greek is one of the best represented languages in terms of tree banks. Only those tree banks were originally created before the birth of universal dependencies, and the most important formats that were established were the one of the ancient Greek dependency tree banks of Perseus, that's been taken up by other projects like the Gorman trees. Probably Vanessa Gorman, who annotated those tree banks, have presented many times in Sunoikisis. The Pedalion by team in Leuven, etc., etc. And the other one that is from a project based in Oslo, Proyel, directed by Dagau, who also spoke several times in Sunoikisis. And those schemas, however, the ancient Greek dependency tree bank and Proyel, have been converted to UD. So the current distribution of UD for ancient Greek has two tree banks, the ancient Greek dependency tree bank and Proyel. There might be, however, problems in the conversion, so it's always a work in progress, this conversion. So this, in a nutshell, is what most people would tell you if you ask them why UD is important and why it's relevant. But if you ask me, I will also say that one huge advantage that universal dependency has is the community effect, because as I said, universal dependencies is also a community, and that means that it's an active community with a lot of discussion, a lot of revision and clarification of the guidelines. But also, more practically, there are tools being produced all the time to visualize, work, annotate, produce, enrich universal dependencies tree banks. And this, I think, it's extremely important, especially if we work on minority languages or languages that don't have such a huge base of researchers and scholars working around the globe, as maybe Latin or ancient Greek might have. But even in Latin and ancient Greek, we can always spare time if somebody else does works like designing tools or something like this. And in the remaining part of my presentation, I would like to introduce a couple of tools to you that you can use to produce and revise annotation. Maybe I will have the time to present just one of them, and I will be very short about the second one. But the one that I would like to start with is UD Pipe. What is UD Pipe? It's a web application, so to speak. So let's simplify a bit. To use pre-trained models, language models, to produce CONLLU files and UD annotations. We will see it in action in a second. The second tool that I want to talk about is a visual editor. It's a graphical tool to review and perform annotation. It's called CONLLU editor. And then there are other interesting apps that you can use, for example, for querying tree banks like PMLTQ, which is also available online. And an interesting little application called UD Easy that was developed by a colleague of ours in Pavia. To query software and also work as a desktop application. It's interesting because it can work not just with the published UD tree banks, but also with your own tree banks if you're if you have them. Oops, no, I didn't mean to. Okay. Before we head to the UDPipe web page, let me just clarify why pipe and what do we mean by pipeline, because UDPipe is a pipeline. By pipeline, we mean a suite of application, a suite of components also of an application that are chained in such a way that the output of one part of the application or one service becomes the input of the next one. And pipelines are particularly suitable for linguistic annotation because most of the tasks that you need to perform in order to have a finalized annotated tree bank go from the simple to a more complex one, and they build on each other. So, for example, before everything else, before even starting to think about the syntactic relations within a sentence, you have to separate the sentences, to split the sentences, and to separate the component, the tokens, the words within your sentences that you want to put in relations. This is called sentence splittings and tokenization. This is the first component of a pipeline. And then there are more complex operations. You have to do the part-of-speech tagging. On top of the part-of-speech tagging, or together with the part-of-speech tagging, you perform the lemmatization. And after you have a lemmatized and tagged tree, and also you can perform the morphological full annotation, and on top of this semi-analyzed text where morphology is accounted for, you can start guessing the syntactic relations. So now let's go to the page of universal dependencies and have a quick look on the section called tools. You can see there are a lot of tools, as I said, but I am particularly interested right now in this processing tool, and in particular to the UDPipe that I was mentioned. There's a brief introduction here. I leave it to you to scroll the rest if you're curious of the tools that are available. But we can head here to the service, to the UDPipe service. Well, okay, how do we run this UDPipe service so that we can have some linguistic annotation? Well, service is described very well over here. You can see that you can input the text in this box and it will be analyzed. First of all, though, we have to choose a language model that has been trained to one of the tree banks, one of the, how many were there? 228 tree banks of UD to produce annotation. We are going to annotate a Latin text for this exercise, so we can select one of the Latin model, the model trained on the Latin tree bank. Let's use the one by Perseus. We want to tag and lemmatize because we want to start really from a raw text. And over here, you can see that you can, for example, if you want to specify that your input is already in ConLLU, or if you just want something that is already been split into sentence or tokenized, you can select different type of option. But we are very happy with the options as they are. I have already selected a text for you. It's the beginning of Cicero treatise on divination, the Divinazione. It's just to show you. It's just to show you how this works. I have copied the text from Perseus project and I will input in this box. Over here, all right, I got a ConLLU file with annotation. You can see that all these words were annotated. All these columns, these 10 columns were filled. We can also, well, visualize that as a table, or we can view it as a tree over here. We can already view it as a tree, or we can download everything as a ConLLU file. So let's do that for this example. And over here, if you go to if you use, as I said, if you use a simple text editor, you can see your text over here. Well, since this is text editor, nothing prevents you from inspecting this text from its text editor, reading and see if the annotation is good or not. Like, for example, you might not like the fact that this ducta over here is annotated as an adjective, you might think that this is perhaps a form of the verb duco, and you can correct it. Yes, you can specify that it's a verb, and you change the lemma. But obviously, then you will have to change the rest of the of this annotation. I'm not sure why this annotation looks so bad. Perhaps I was just chosen a wrong model. So let me just save this output, which looks better. Perhaps I was just I just downloaded a wrong file. Oh, it looks like it's exactly what it's downloading me. But anyway, so this is, and you can see that in the metadata from a sentence, you have a few information on the sentences, like, for example, the model that this sentences was generated with, and a license, and so on. That's all very good. So I showed you, even if this text doesn't look quite like the text that I downloaded from that I just produced, and I sincerely don't know why, but that's beside the point. Let's not just be bothered by this strange technical problem that I seem to have. We can use this tool to just we can just use a text editor, any text editor, to correct and edit this text file as much as we want. Like, for example, over here, yes, I corrected the ducta part and modified this annotation. But what if we want something that is a little more user-friendly? Well, one thing that we can use is this software, ConLLU editor, which is also listed under the UD tools, and can be downloaded from here. And it's probably not the easiest one to install, but I managed to do it. So I'm sure everybody can, with just probably a little help from some more tech-savvy people. Just in case, it's also a web application, but it's not currently working on a server, on a public server. So you need to run it on your own machine in your local, start a local server on your own machine, and then serve it with a ConLLU file of your choice. This is a command that you can use to launch this tool. You can pass just the path to your file, to your ConLLU file, and a port that you want your ConLLU editor to run to, and it will be fine. So let me try if it works. Yeah, hopefully it works. And you can see that this annotation has not performed very well, but that's not bad. Also because, so that the annotation that I downloaded actually doesn't make any sense. Everything is up to this word vetus, but that's actually not that bad, because we can. That's also to show you that in case you want to annotate a text where there is no language model for you already available, well, you can just start by using a random model to whatever language you want. The result will be horrible, like this one, but at the same time, you will see that you can work with you at least produce a ConLLU file that you can use to annotate, to load into an annotator like this one, and then produce annotation. So, for example, we may start working the annotation. We know that, for example, here we'll have to change a few things. So, for example, that this one is a noun, and see that since this is a universal part, you will have a category that it's already produced. And this is going to be the subject of the sentence. So it's going to be the en subj part. And subject of what? Well, for example, we can We can start by saying one interpretation that you can give of this sentence is this est is an existential. Now, so there is an old opinion. So you might want to be tempted to make this the root of the sentence. So we can do like that in ConnellLU editor, and then we make vetus depending on the opinion as an adjective modifier, so an a mode. Also because we want to say that this is an adjective, right? Something like that. And so on and so forth. You can go on and annotate everything. So where do you find this explanation on these labels, which are also, by the way, universal? So you cannot apply whatever label you want on the in the UD website. You find a section that is dedicated to the guide, to explaining the guideline. So UD annotation guideline, and you can see whole description of everything. So here in this case, for example, when you finished reading the basic principle, you can just find explanation of the sequence of the label. In the suggested reading that I gave you, you can find a pretty good explanation of universal dependencies in terms of the linguistic principles and the rationale that's behind this the annotation schema. Here you can find a reference on the meaning of the different labels. So maybe we leave to the discussion how we can contribute to linguistic annotation that uses UD if you are interested. I will suggest a simple exercise for you if you want, which basically mirrors exactly what we did in this presentation. So you can select a text in any ancient, or by the way, any modern languages as well, that you prefer, and prepare your text as you want. For example, you can save a TXT file like I did, optionally pre-process it if you want. So for example, deleting titles, paragraph, page number, etc. Go to the UD Pipe 2 web services as we did, select a language model, hopefully the right one, not the one that I did, but if the language you selected does not have one, choose whatever language model you find, and you will produce something that doesn't make any sense, like the Latin ConnellLU file that I ended up downloading, but that doesn't. But that allows you, yes, to have at least a skeleton of your ConnellLU file. Save it, download it, and edit it by text editor, like we did. By the way, you might have noticed that my editor had colored syntax. That's because editors like Sublime Text or Atom have plugins for the ConnellLU syntax, so that if you install that, it's easier to visualize the different column. And by the way, you can have you have also tools that help you visualize, is also by copy pasting, visualize the sentences. Or you can, like we did, you can install ConU editor and use it to edit your own trees, and obviously have a lot of fun with UD. That being said, I leave the floor to Francesca for her presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Gabi and to Monica for the invitation. And thank you very much to you, Francesco, for having presented useful concepts also for my presentation. The aims of my presentation is to show how you could contribute to the WAPOS project, but also to make you operational and able to contribute immediately if you wish. First, I will present very briefly the WAPOS project. And second, I will present more in detail the WAPOS corpus. Our third point is about how you could contribute to improve the WAPOS corpus, and I will focus on two aspects: the correction of the automatic linguistic annotation, and then the annotation of modality. Do not worry if you don't know what is modality or in which sense modality is used here. We will see it in the second part of the presentation. I've also planned some exercises that we'll do together during the presentation. WAPOS is the short title of a world of possibilities, modal pathways over an extra long period of time, the diachrony of modality in the Latin language. This is a project funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation, and in the team we are 5 people at the moment. The goal of the project is to reconstruct the evolution of modal meanings from the prehistory of the Latin language up to the 7th century CE. In order to achieve this goal, we are setting up a corpus. This corpus is diachronic and balanced. So, as said, this corpus has these two main features. It is diachronic, covering 1 millennium, and it is balanced. It is balanced with respect to criteria such as genre or geographical origin of authors or of documents. Of course, it is difficult to have a corpus perfectly balanced, and this because of limitations due to the way in which the Latin language is attested. You can think, for example, of comedy. So comedy is a genre that is better represented in the pre-classical stage of the language. And so in this sense, it is almost impossible to have a corpus that is balanced in any diachronic stage for all genre, but we are trying to do our best to have a as far as possible balanced corpus. We carry out 2 types of annotation: an automatic annotation and a manual annotation. The annotation of the corpus allows users to query the corpus. If you want to try it, a small part of the corpus is already available online, and we have set up a search interface, and so you can search, you can query the corpus. We have 2 main types of query, and the search by modal marker and the search by modal relation. I will come back to it later, maybe in the discussion if we have time to go more in detail. This is not the focus of my presentation today. For the automatic annotation, we use models trained on tree bank data. Francesco has already explained the process. And we use these models. In particular, our model is the UD Perseus tree bank. We use this model to carry out an automatic annotation for the tokenization, for the parts of speech, for the lemmas, for the morphosyntactic features, and also for the dependencies. Today, I won't speak about the syntactic dependencies. If you are interested in using models from tree banks, you can watch a previous session of Sunoikisis Digital Classicist, session 7 of SunoikisisDC Fall 2020 about using tree banks. So, as also Francesco said, the performance of the automatic annotation is not bad, but there are always some errors. And so in the WAPOS project, we really appreciate external help to correct such errors. For the moment, we don't have external contributors, but we would be very happy to welcome you in the project, and I am going to explain how you could contribute. So, for example, we can have errors in the tokenization, so the text elements have not been correctly separated. For example, you can have a tego taken as one word, but as you can imagine, it should be analyzed as two words, so et, ego. We can have errors in the parts of speech, so the token has not been attributed to the correct category. For example, ego could have been associated with the label verb instead of pronoun, and so we need to correct it. We can have errors at the level of lemmas. So, for example, ego analyzed with the lemma faccio and not with the lemma ego. And we can also have errors in the morphosyntactic description. So, for example, ego analyzed as an accusative and not as a nominative. In concrete terms, if you want to contribute, you have to have a GitHub account and then to go to the WAPOS repository contributing. In the PowerPoint presentation, there are slides which explain you step by step how to do, and I'm going to present them to you in a second. But basically, when you are in the WAPOS repository contributing, you have to fork it, you have to open the file, to do the changes, to commit the changes, do a pull request, and then we will be able to see the changes and accept your suggestions. Okay, so here you can see the GitHub page and the repository of WAPOS called Contributing. As soon as you have a GitHub account, you can click on Contributing and you can contribute. Then you have to fork the repository going here. You fork the repository and create a new fork. And in this new fork, you will be able to make changes. We have prepared small files containing the Satyricon, and you can choose one of these files and read the text and look for errors. So in order to edit the file, you can go directly on the pen and click on the pen, or you can go here and click on edit this file, and you will be immediately able to change the file. So, for example, in the first, at the beginning of the Satyricon, you can already find some errors. For example, num has been annotated with a very strange lemma, which does not exist, of course, and so it needs to be corrected. Another error you can find is about this noun, declamatores, which has been analyzed as a form of the lemma declamo, but should be better analyzed as having a lemma declamator. So you can do the changes because you can edit the text, and then you can commit the changes. You can write a short description that you corrected a lemma, as in this case, but you can just say that you corrected a portion of text. And then you commit the changes to the main branch and pull the request going here. And then we will be able, in the WAPOS project, to see what has been changed. Here, for example, we can see that the lemma of declamo is being changed in declamator. Now you know how to contribute to the correction of the automatic annotation. I'm now going to explain how you can contribute to the manual annotation. We carry out manual annotation for the annotation of modal passages. In the project, the annotators rely on guidelines, the WAPOS guidelines for annotation. But in this session, I am going to outline a simplified version of the guidelines. The annotation, the manual annotation, is carried out in a very user-friendly platform, which is called Inception. In order to be able to carry out the manual annotation, you will need an account in Inception, and we are very happy to prepare one for you. You have just to contact the team, and we will prepare one for you. If you are interested to know more about the WAPOS annotation of modality, you can look another SunoikisisDC digital classicist session. This was about linguistic annotations of Greek and Latin inscriptions. In this session, it is explained how modal passages are annotated. Okay, now we need to explain what is modality. Modality is the expression of the notional domains of necessity, possibility, and volition with respect to an imagined situation. Let's take, for example, a lexical modality markers, such as possum, I can. I can say, I can do something, and this situation, do something, is only imagined, is not actual, is it not yet realized. In this sense, modality is used to speak about imagined situations, and in this presentation, I will call these imagined situations the modalized state of affairs. So the state of affairs could be modalized in terms of necessity, possibility, and volition. Okay. We have three main types of modality, at least in our framework. I have forgot to say that there are many definitions of modality. There are different perspectives on this phenomenon, and the definition that I have given, it is valid in our framework. In our framework, we recognize three main types of modality. I will start with epistemic modality because it is the easiest one. Epistemic modality express the stance of the speaker in relation to the chance or likelihood that a state of affairs will take place or is taking place. Here, for example, you see this sentence: that's probably the postman bringing today's newspaper. So the state of affairs, the imagined situation, is the postman who brings the newspaper. The speaker is not certain, it is just an hypothesis. So it is expressed in terms of likelihood. Probably it is him, but we are not sure. The second type of dynamic, of modality is deontic modality. Typically, deontic modality is associated with a source of authority, and in this domain we have obligations and permissions. So you can see from the example, you can imagine your boss saying, "You can go now." But in this domain of deontic modality, we can have also other notions, such as, for example, what is desirable, what is acceptable, or we can have advice, for example. It is not necessarily about obligations and permissions. But I think for this presentation, it will be enough. And we have then dynamic modality. Dynamic modality is more generically about possibilities and necessities. So, for example, here in relation to the inherent possibilities and necessities of someone, we have abilities and needs. So, for example, we have here this example: he can stand on his head without using his hands, which express an ability of the subject. Also, generic possibilities fall in the domain of dynamic modalities. So just generic statements such as it is possible to do this, or it is necessary to do this. So the difference with deontic modality is that there is not a source of authority issuing an order or a permission. As said, if you want to contribute to the semantic annotation of modality, you will need an Inception account, and we are very, very happy to provide you with an account. So just write to us. When you will be in the Inception platform, you will see that we have prepared some documents, Cicero's letters to Brutus. You can just pick up one, you read the text and look for modal markers. We have a list of modal markers. You can find them clicking on the link. And when you find a marker, you annotate it as a marker. Then you look for the scope of the marker. The scope of the marker is the modalized state of affairs, this modalized imagined situation. And finally, if you think to have recognized the type of modality, you can annotate it. Now I will show you how this appears. So here you are inside Inception, and you see the list of documents that need to be annotated. You can choose one. Here you see how the text appears. As you can see, you have the Latin text. So here, for example, multa eius indicia sed ad scribendum non necessaria. And then you see that you have an analysis. So you have the lemma. Here, for example, you have the analysis of the morphological features, and you have the part of speech. We won't focus on this in this presentation, but we want to focus on the markers. And here, for example, in this sentence, there is a markers at the end, this non necessaria. So we can translate this. There are many indications, indicia, but they need not be put into writing. In more simple terms, it is not necessary to write them down. So necessaria is our modal markers, and the state of affairs, the imagined state of affairs, is to write, so scribendum. So when you have identified a marker, here, for example, necessaria, you will go on the right part of the screen, and you will find a menu associated to this layer. And you have to select modal unit. Once you have selected modal unit, you have to click on the word, so here necessario, or you can also highlight it. And then you will see this layer potential marker the layer modal unit will be added to the analysis. Then you go here under A and you select the type of modal unit. So necessarius is a modal marker, so you choose a marker. Let's go on. Then we want to annotate also the scope unit, scribendum. And so also in this case, you check that the layer is a modal unit here. And then you click on scribendum, or you can highlight it. And the layer modal unit will be added. Then here in A, you have to choose the type of modal unit. In this case, it is the scope unit. Then you can try to guess which type of modality we have here. I would say that we have a dynamic modality, but I am open to discussion if you think that it is another type. And in this case, you have to trace a line between the scope unit and the potential marker, and then to specify the type of modality. Here you have a menu, and you have to decide if it is deontic, dynamic, or epistemic. And now you also know how to contribute to the annotation of modality. I would like to conclude with a list of reasons why it could be interesting for you to contribute to the WAPOS project. First, you will have a stimulus to read the Latin texts. And so you will be able to improve your knowledge of Latin literature. If you prefer inscriptions, we have also inscriptions. We can provide you with inscriptions. You will be able to improve your Latin grammar. You will also improve your ability to interpret Latin texts, in particular with the modality analysis, because you need to decide what were the intentions and the thoughts of the writer or of the character which is presented in the text. And last but not least, your work will be citable. So we have this responsibility statement in our XML-TI file, and so your name will be recorded in the file. As you see here, you see, for example, the name of one of the previous annotators, and even if she doesn't work anymore, for us, her name has remained. Yes, so now I will thank you. I have had some additional material at the end of my presentation with the tag set for the part of speech in case you need them quickly, but you can go and look for them in the Universal Dependencies web page, as Francesco has shown you. And this is the tag set for the morphosyntactic description. And so thank you very much.
Merci, Francesca. That's fantastic. And thank you both. This is a really exciting set of technologies and of standards and of projects. I think this will be really interesting, and it's really cool to see that all of these things can be contributed to by the general public, well, not entirely general public, but scholarly public, including students. And as Francesca just showed, the ability to cite students' names by each one. This is exactly the sort of thing we want to be talking about this semester. Maybe just creating one annotation or correcting one lemma in GitHub is not a huge thing. It's not something that a professor is going to want to put on their CV. I corrected one lemma in WordPress. But having done a handful of those for a student is already a sign of some experience of this sort of thing, and it's worth it. And if I'd gone in and changed 1,000 lemmas from automatically annotated things, then I might want to put that on my my CV and say, that is something that that I've spent quite a bit of time doing and acquired a certain amount of expertise and contributed to this scholarly resource, which is of value to the community. So those sort of things I think are really important. This was a really good illustration. I mean, the same with with the various universal dependency tree banks that exist. Those sorts of contributions I think are really really cool. I had a sort of small question and a reminder to anybody watching live that you can ask questions in the chat, and we'll come to them. But I had a small question which is to what degree do the sorts of annotations that you're producing, Francesca, so annotations about modality, but also the improvements to your automatically annotated tree banks, you're using universal dependencies. I think or at least in the example you showed, you used UD to train the data. To what degree are the extra information you're producing things that could be fed back into some of the UD corpora?
Thank you for this question. I still don't know, I have to admit. I think I have, I think, for example, there are features that we annotate and that I have not shown today. For example, whether the main participant in this state of affairs, in this modalized state of affairs, is animate or not. And I have seen that also in some UD3 banks, there are these type of features, whether the named, whether the entities are animate or are not. So I think that this could be something interesting. Also for us to have some more information from the tree banks, but also to go back, so to say, with our annotation to the tree bank. I think that our annotation is really highly specialized for people that are mainly interested in modality, and of course it could be interesting to have this type of annotation also in the corpus, but I'm wondering how many other kind of annotations it would be interesting to have in a corpus. So I think you won't finish, you won't never finish to annotate and to enrich the annotation of the corpus. So yeah, I think this is the kind of answer, if you accept them, Gabby.
If I may say something about that, this is obviously a bit complicated because universal dependency is such a huge project, which is a good thing. Obviously, it involves a lot of people and a lot of teams around the world, but it also makes for kind of a complex workflow. It is probably already a little more complicated in the case of many tree banks, including the ancient Greek and Latin ones. The fact that we are most of the time we are dealing with projects that pre-exist the creation of UD, and then have their own annotation schema and gets into UD as a converted tree banks. So most of the time, if you spot a mistake in the UD annotation, the workflow for the maintainer of this corpora would be to check if the error is already in the original source. They correct it then, and then whenever they are regenerating a conversion, everything will be incorporated. Anyway, I didn't mention that, but the tree banks are stored in GitHub. Universal Dependencies uses GitHub for managing everything. So every project is a repository in GitHub that then gets synced with the UD repository. And one fantastic thing about GitHub is that they have the issue tracker, so one can always open an issue and point out if there are mistakes or problems that have to be solved.
Or send another pull request and let them.
Exactly, absolutely. Also that. Absolutely. And oh yeah, of course, and there is also another additional problem if you do, like, for example, literary texts, ancient Greek and Latin literary text, that line between a mistake and a different interpretation is most of the time perfectly clear. Some other time can be a little blurred. So that most of the time, if you just don't agree with an interpretation of a sentence, you don't go to a corporal maintainer, say, look, this sentence should be probably annotated better like that, because maybe they will just reply, no, I think I think my annotation is correct, and then it becomes a matter of debate. This is an important point, I guess. I don't know, to tell you the truth. It's a problem that sometimes we will have to solve, I guess. But one of when we started tree banking with Greg Crane in the Persus project, one of the greatest idea of the general editor of the Persus project, Gregory Crane, who actually kicked off this initiative of tree banking for ancient Greek and Latin at the Persus project. One of his greatest ideas, I still think, was to say that tree bank is a form of interpretation, tree banking annotation. And so we are allowed to disagree on the way of interpreting Homer. There is not just one right linguistic interpretation of Homer, but we always will have discussions about how to read a single passage, or of Virgil, or of the tragedies, or so on and so forth. And so for Greg Crane, the idea was that we wouldn't necessarily have one authoritative tree bank of Greek, but constellation of different tree bank annotations that might be in dialectic dialogue between each other, to see that to reflect the different interpretation of the scholars or the students that make this annotation. Obviously, people can have, as I said, many different corpora of many different tree banks in UD. I am not sure, to tell you the truth, if these different tree banks, so for one language, like for example Proyel, Persus, etc., can also have the same text annotated. If UD are people maintaining UD are okay with, obviously this problem might present itself for modern corpora, but it's kind of unlikely that you will have different version of the same Wall Street Journal article across different English tree bank. It's not impossible, but I don't know. We should probably get in touch with the general editor of UD to ask if it's okay having corpora annotating, having different project in UD annotating the same texts.
I think another important point to be underscored for ancient text is also that we relied on editions, on philological editions, and they can be different. So if we set up our tree bank on an edition, someone else could prepare another tree bank on another edition, and this can also bring to differences between them. The analysis and then the results. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Sorry, very small follow up to that is: do the UD tree banks already contain other semantic layers, or are they things that might be in the source data but that don't go in because they're not part of the UD syntax?
Some projects may choose to have other type, and an interesting thing is that UD also have now an enhanced format of a ConnellLU plus format, where you can have multiple co-reference. For example, is added often. Like if there is a pronoun, a link to the noun that this pronoun refers to. This type of co-reference. I know that co-reference is done in some. If you want to know my opinion, is that we should probably avoid the model where we have one tree bank to rule them all. So meaning putting everything stacked on top of one single file with all this information, but have ways to have a link between different annotation, insisting on the same tokens. But at the same time, yes, there are like, for example, there are projects using UD formalism to account for the morphology, some morphological properties, derivation on morphologies, for example, and co-references of our named entities are also annotated sometimes in this enhanced UD tree banks. So yeah, there are already projects going in this direction.
Yes, okay, so I have, well, first I want to say that, of course, I agree on the interpretative part. Annotating means most of the time to interpret the text, and so definitely, so we can agree on that. And I can also add that the agreement or the disagreement is something interesting. For example, in Inception, we have the possibility to measure the agreement or the disagreement. So this is another interesting question about annotating. Then I have a big question about sustainability. So there is some noise. I apologize for that. So I hope. Okay, good. I can go on. So sustainability. Francesca and Francesco, they both mentioned the problem of correcting mistakes. When doing digital humanities, digital classics, etc., we have been learning that most of the time we have to correct data. How much is sustainable? I mean, also you, Francesca, you have mentioned this. I look for people, so please help me. I know that by experience, I have projects where I have the same problem. I have been trying to implement tools for allowing people to help me. This is an open question, I think. How much this is sustainable? It's difficult to find people helping us. It's difficult still to find students, also because there are other problems. For example, how can we assess this kind of activity? How can we evaluate this kind of activity? To ask students correct mistakes, for example. We know that it's not just about correcting, but students can learn. But this is an open question. Maybe you have an answer, but how much is sustainable that? This is the first question. Then maybe we can discuss this. Then I have another specific question for Francesca. So I don't know if you already have data, if you already have people contributing to your project for correcting, or students.
Thank you very much for this question. And I assure you, Monica, this is something about which I ask myself about this option. I think that so I think that Sunoikis today was for me a great opportunity to...
You don't have to answer this question. This is an open question. I don't have an answer, for example. I mean, I try. I look for people helping me, helping my projects. And so we know that for OCR, definitely, for example, we have been discussing this a lot, and for linguistic annotations again. So yeah, but please, Francesca, so if you have
I think that there are aspects that are for sure interesting for students, even if there is not a contract behind. I really think that this kind of correction. So I think that reading a text, trying to find errors in the annotation can be something very useful from the point of view of the training of a person. And I think the fact of making the work of students or other willing people citable is really fundamental, because they will be able to cite it in their CV and to show. So our files are online, they are free, so anyone can access them, open them, and see how many people have contributed to create that file and what everyone has done. Of course, ideally it would be great to have a lot of financial resources and to be able to to propose a contract for everyone.
I think it's something more than that. So I totally agree with you. Correcting mistakes is useful, so you can learn a lot. The problem is that we don't have a system. It's not just about money or funds for paying students, but is to ingest into the educational system the fact that correcting mistakes is also an educational activity. So usually this is not accepted. Our colleagues, they don't accept it. No, this is a mistake, so we can't use this source. This is a mistake, so we avoid this kind of data because there is a mistake. So I don't want to be provocative, but I know the problem. So it's not only about, again, funds, it's about step by step to try to ingest into our methods, into our universities, also in our schools, the fact that working with data is also correcting mistakes. So this was an open question, but and you have these projects, we have projects, and as you mentioned now, so you have also the possibility, so people can do that. Of course, other colleagues with students, they can use your data and they can have students correcting your data, for example. Of course, this is a big question. I mean, we don't have now today an answer because there are practical problems first, but also bigger problems like accepting that correcting mistakes is a useful, I think, educational activity. Yeah.
I think that yes, you are right, and thank you for enlarging the view on this issue. But I think you are right when you say that it is a more general problem, an educational problem. And yes, probably colleagues are not so keen to accept that students correct data, but probably also students do not really know,
Yes.
or also are wondering: is it something to be done? Is it useful? I think you make the point.
Yeah. Well, yes, we know, but anyway, so things are happening, so I'm optimistic. I don't know if there are other questions on this aspect or other comments, but I have a specific question for Francesca because she's using Inception, and my question is about your layer. So if I understand correctly, and I have here a screenshot of your slides.
Yep.
For the model unit, you have a custom layer. That's correct. Yep. And my question is for exporting data in that case. So what format do you use? Because we know that there are limits, for example, for custom layers. I know that for named entities, for example, because I have a custom layer, for example, for annotating authors and works. Of course, we can export also custom layers, but not every format in Inception allows to do that. That's correct?
Okay, so we can export the annotation and also the manual annotation and the customized layer, and we export them in ConnellU.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I can.
Yes, one of those. Yes, because for example, for name entities there are limits, but of course we know that. So
I am wondering whether I could try to download something and show it to you very.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is possible.
Because one of the okay, here we have, yeah.
Let me see. So here, this animate. So this is so we have a vellet here. Let me just try to do it.
Is the second icon, not the one with the folder, but the other one in black?
Yes. Also, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Now,
okay.
ConnellU. Yes. Let me try to do it, and then. Let me see. Yes. Let me see. Okay, should be.
I don't want to get you in trouble, so I'm sorry for this
No,
question.
no,
But I'm
okay.
asking because Inception is flexible, so we can create custom layers. Of course, we can export them. We can't, so not every format can ingest custom layers. This is a very technical question, I mean, but
Yeah,
still.
yeah. So actually, I cannot see. So I will show you how it appears. So basically, I cannot see here the semantic annotation, which means that I am missing something, but I think that I have to look
Probably at the beginning,
documentation.
there is a sort of header at the beginning of the file. So if you go to the top, you can.
I have the answer, because Elena Bermudez-Tabel, who is the person working on the technical aspect, has told me that the format is XMI.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so this is, but maybe we have to prepare it in advance, because...
No, I'm sorry, Francesca, I didn't want it. It was just a technical question, but again, so I don't want you now to show data. Anyway, so if I understand, this is a custom layer, the model unit.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, of course, again, going back to Inception, in any case, there are various possibilities for exporting custom layers, because there are built-in layers in Inception, but definitely we may need. So, for example, I need also for name entities at some point, I need a custom layer because I have a specific interest in annotating author names and word titles. And I can do that, so I can export data, not in every format, but still, it works. And in any case, thank you for showing the file, because in Inception we have this nice interface with the layers, etc. But then the data behind is like you showed us in the file. So thank you, Francesca. We have a question in the chat, I see. Yes, of course. So there is a question by Lucas Consolin Desotti from Monespi, Brazil. So yes, please, you can write your questions in the chat. Okay, and here we have a first question for Francesco.
Okay, so the question is if I think that the UD model guidelines are more suitable than the one by Perseus, the Latin dependency tree bank, ancient Greek dependency tree bank models for someone starting a tree bank project. That's a great question, actually, yes. In a sense, yes, they might be. I mean, I loved the ancient Greek dependency tree bank guidelines very much because I annotated many tragedies with them. The problem with those guidelines is they were a little bit underspecified, meaning that you cannot possibly list all the constructions that you will find in every single text and specify exactly, precisely the annotation that the annotator must use to account for this specific construction. And that sometimes generates a bit of confusion in the annotator, and the annotator feels a little lost, especially if it's if they are starting with the annotation. Whereas, yes, sometimes the same is true also for universal dependencies, but the fact that a universal dependency is so huge, one of the other advantages is the fact that it's widely discussed. And most of the time, even if the guidelines are a little counterintuitive in their solution, or if they or they don't say exactly what you can do, there are tons of tree banks to get inspiration from. So you can start saying, okay, but this construction reminds me of one other one in a language. You can go to a website and search for how this same this construction from another language was annotated in that language, or you can see the discussions between the people that revise the guidelines and find a solution. So in this sense, I think that's a great advantage. That's why I think I will recommend UD, yes. But it's up to anybody working with in the end, it's a matter of preference. So
this leads to a question I had, which I thought was maybe a bit delicate, so I didn't ask it, but I'm going to go ahead. Partly because you, when you talked about the AGLDT guidelines just now, you did so in the past tense. Maybe that was just in a reflection of the fact that you used to use them a lot more and you now use UD more. But my question was, is there any sense in which the Perseus tree banks might move to UD?
Now, again, because Greg had this vision at the beginning and everything is going probably according to his vision, the fact is that now the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank guidelines are used by a variety of different projects, and not all of them want to move to UD at all. So, for example, I think Vanessa Gorman is perfectly happy to work with those guidelines. Pedalion, well, they're thinking about, but they are happy with what they are doing. Maria Vierros from the Samatia are also happy producing. So I don't think all of them will go to UD. The ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank, as it is right now, it's not growing. So it's the collection that is published as the ancient Greek dependency tree bank now doesn't incorporate new annotation, as far as I know. Because this will be a question probably for the editor of the editors of this collection. So I don't know what they plan to do. So yes, the past tense for me was more than I used to be a contributor to that collection, and now the projects that I do move rather towards UD. So yes.
And in any case, there's that automatic conversion that you both mentioned. That means even if they continue working in the existing format, in the existing guidelines, you can always produce better or worse, yes, but okay UD, yes, compatible tree banks out of it.
We have the second question from Lucas. This is for Francesca.
Hello. We use the Stanza tools, the tools that are provided by the Stanford group, Stanza. I cannot see the question.
There is a second part.
Yes, this is what is able to produce the files that the analysis that you can see. Then no, actually, to have so in our pipeline there is also a TI conversion of the files. So and the TI conversion is the final step. Of one of the final step. So basically what you see now in the contributing section is something that has been already post-processed after the automatic annotation. And there is also, and if you look at that file, you will also see the manual annotation with the modal passages and the description of the modal passages. Or automatic lemmatizer. So for the automatic annotation, we use the Stanza tools. They use the tools that are provided by them. Yeah.
Yes, and we have the link in the chat to Stanza, so you are able to see that also.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
In the session on annotating Greek and Latin inscriptions, and also in the other session, the one about using tree banks, there are more details about how we use models to automatically annotate the text. Yeah.
Yes, and one general note about what Francesco said before. So if you want to start annotating, you can now consult many annotated text. And this is something we mentioned at the beginning of Sunoikis in 2015, I remember. So use those annotated texts to learn, to see, of course, this is where you start. But again, this is another interesting educational activity to learn by analyzing those files. And now we have many repositories from different projects with different texts belonging to different genres, as we can see, poetry, prose, text, etc. And then many different genres, different languages. And so you can, this is for our students, I mean, you can get a sense of annotations and then learn how to move on.
This is great. So we're officially at the end of the hour, as it were, or the end of the hour and a half. Thank you all very much again for the presentations and for the discussion. Thank you, Lucas, for the questions, and for other people who are watching. Unless anyone has anything burning they want to jump in with now. So the next session in this semester, which will be the last session in this semester, is in 2 weeks' time, on December the 8th. That's 2 weeks' time. And so it's on a Thursday again, back to the original day of the week. And that will involve Monica and our colleague Shani Evanstein, who will talk about using and editing Wikidata. So a slight follow-on from the discussion of Wikipedia that we had a couple of weeks ago, and I think a very interesting and exciting session. So please join us for that in a couple of weeks. Thank you again, Francesca and Francesco.
Thank you. Have a good day.